It's a recipe to make education unavailable to black people.
He is trying to make us go back to the fields.
Just when you thought things couldn't get more unhinged, woke politicians take race baiting to absurd new levels. We're going to break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across our media, politics, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, the over-the-top doomsday rhetoric of constantly yelling about how the sky is falling didn't work out very well for Democrats during President Trump's first term, but they've learned nothing, apparently, because high-profile Democratic elected officials are doubling down on alarmism and hyperbole, this time with an unhinged race-baiting twist. We're going to take a look at a couple of remarks that several prominent Democratic members of Congress made during a live stream this week. First, here's Congressman Hank Johnson seriously suggesting that Trump and Republicans are trying to rob black people of their chance to get education so they become slaves again. Take a listen.
The Secretary of Education now, who is committed to abolishing that department of the federal government. Moreover, she is a strong supporter of things like the misnamed school choice. She's a school choicer, and she's a charter school advocate. So all of the ways in which they can kill public education, from defunding it from a federal level and then also enabling state monies and local monies to flow into the private for-profit school setup that is ongoing. It's a recipe to make education unavailable to black people. And where does that then leave us? It puts us back to when America was great and we were picking cotton and all of it. We're doing the productivity that they are putting my Latino brothers and sisters who migrate here to do that work, because we are not suited intellectually to do it anymore. And but they would have us back confined to doing that kind of work. So we got to watch out for where we are headed. And it's the people that will save our democracy, that will stop this movement towards the past that Trump has us hurtling towards.
There are so many problems with that rant. It's hard to know where to begin, but did he just accidentally suggest that Latinos should be the ones picking crops because black people are intellectually superior to them? Yeah, that's racist, dude. And it is totally insane to frame the Republican push for school choice, which allows taxpayer money to help fund students' education wherever they choose to receive it, whether it's at a public school, a charter school, or a private school, as somehow denying black people education, when in reality, it's specifically designed to help students who are failed by the current system and trapped into failing public schools. And that tends to be disproportionately black students and black families, which is why it's an overwhelmingly popular policy plan, specifically with African Americans and other racial minorities. And he's suggesting it's some evil plan to make black people pick cotton again. A sitting congressman is saying this, and all these other people on the call are just nodding along as if that's not an insane thing to suggest. Now, we're going to take a look at another clip from the one and only Jasmine Crockett, that rising star of the Democratic Party, where she said something similarly unhinged as part of the same call. But first, a message from today's sponsor. As we speak, a criminal could be trying to steal your home out from underneath you. That's why I partner with today's sponsor, Home Title Law. How could somebody steal your home? Well, title fraud is a scam that involves criminals stealing the title or deed of your home, then borrowing against it or selling it behind your back. And without title monitoring, you may not know about it until collection or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox. Because of digitization, everything a thief needs can be easily accessed online. And then they use that information to create fraudulent documents. But how can a bank foreclose on you if it was fraud? Well, well, the criminal and the cash are gone, and now the lender just wants their money back. You're now faced with a financial and legal nightmare to prove you were the victim of a crime. But you can avoid this nightmare with Home Title Lock's $1 million triple lock protection. It gets you 24/7 monitoring of your property records, urgent alerts, and if you're the victim of title fraud, their US-based restoration team will work with lawyers and industry experts to restore your title. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to get you a free title history report so you can find out if you're already a victim, and access to your own personal title expert, a $250 value just for signing up. Go to HometitleLock.com and use my promo code BRAD250 or click on the link in the description. Make sure to check out the details of the $1 million triple lock protection when you get there. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code BRAD250 to get the protection and peace of mind that you deserve. All right, now let's take a look at what Congresswoman Crockett had to say. I'm sure it was totally normal and not at all insane.
And as they have decided to go after immigrants and and things like that, and they've said, oh, they taking your black jobs. They taking your black jobs. Not really. They are obviously jobs that they want us to go back to, such as work in the fields, all right? Those immigrants that come into our country, they work the fields, something that we ain't done in a long time. And clearly, he is trying to make us go back to the fields.
Trump is trying to make black people go back to the fields. Yeah, that's why he's cracking down on illegal immigration and deporting people. Girl, what? I don't even fully agree with some of Trump's immigration plans. I'm more moderate on that issue, but his rationale is rooted in his beliefs about national security and economics. And in fact, he even thinks that deporting all these people will be good for the black community because they'll have fewer competitors for jobs and that kind of thing. And we could get into that whole debate. But one thing he's most certainly not motivated by is trying to make black people go back to picking cotton. Y'all sound insane and delulu to the highest degree. And it's not just them. We just talked about this yesterday, but Congresswoman Latifah Simon said something super similar on MSNBC this week about how Trump is trying to take us back to the 1950s.
We're going back to a 1950s America. I want to be very clear about that for those of us who have parents, who have aunts and uncles and communities that are still alive, who remembered what a Jim Crow America looks like.
All of this is just unhinged, baseless, race-baiting nonsense. There is plenty to criticize about President Trump, about the Trump administration, and he's absolutely said some offensive things over the years if you look at his comments. But he doesn't want to bring back segregation or slavery. That isn't a thing. And y'all just sound deranged when you suggest otherwise. Yes, Trump is rolling back DEI initiatives, so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but oftentimes that's because they're discriminatory and divisive and toxic in their own right. And what he's advocating for in their place is race-neutral meritocracy, not segregation or discrimination, bringing back discrimination. That's a total dishonest portrayal of what the Trump administration and Republicans are trying to do on these issues. And it's all the more absurd because President Trump, whether you like these nominees or not, he's appointed a black cabinet nominee, he's appointed 2 Latino cabinet officials, and actually a gay official as well, the highest ranking gay person in the federal government of all time, I believe. And these people want us to believe that that's a segregationist government. That's what, is that what the 1950s were like? Did I just miss that part? And I have to say, obviously I can't speak for these people, but on their behalf, this is just so insulting, this rhetoric, to the millions of black people who voted for Trump. After all, as Newsweek reports, Donald Trump won more black voters than any Republican in 48 years. And these Democratic officials are basically saying that these people are fools who voted for their own re-enslavement or resegregation. That is such a wild and insulting thing to say when there's no actual basis to it. And I'm sorry, but constantly invoking segregation and slavery like this and just throwing that around like candy on Halloween is honestly disrespectful to the people who suffered from it. And in the case of Jim Crow, there are people still alive who suffered under that evil and oppressive and brutal regime. And you are politicizing and exploiting their trauma and their suffering for your unhinged political cheap shots. It's really reprehensible. And again, like, how many times do we have to play this out? whether it's calling everything racist and then they dilute that to the point where people stop taking it seriously, or overusing Nazi and Hitler and all invoking these things. They're now doing this with so many Democratic officials adopting this rhetoric that's just so obviously detached from reality, whether they realize it or not. They are watering down and minimizing the severity with which people view these topics and these accusations about segregation and about slavery, because they're throwing them around so frivolously and so inappropriately with such speed and frequency that's like they're giving out candy on Halloween, but instead they're just throwing around baseless accusations and hysterical fear-mongering. And that's why so many Americans no longer take these people's warnings seriously. And for that, honestly, they only have themselves to blame. That's my take on all this, but you let me know what you think in the comments below. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Up next, we got to check in with the Democrats who disrupted President Trump's speech before Congress. That was Congressman Al Green, because he was just censured by Congress for his actions that were in violation of congressional rules. And now he's playing the victim and comparing himself to Martin Luther King Jr. Take a listen to this wild clip of him on TV.
I did what conscience called upon me to do, and my convictions demanded that I do when I spoke to the president. I would do it again. I regret that I've been censured. There is talk now of removing me from my committee with the Honorable Maxine Waters, the Financial Services Committee. My guess is this is not over. But I will stand on what I have done. I'm not ashamed of what I have done. And when you mentioned John Lewis at the genesis of this interview, it caused tears to well in my eyes. I knew him. I know his story. He told me that he thought he was going to die on that bridge. And he told me about peaceful protest. And the one thing that stands out in my mind is, when you do it, be prepared to suffer the consequences. Dr. King went to the Birmingham jail because he was prepared to suffer the consequences. I'm prepared to suffer the consequences. I don't say I agree, but I will suffer whatever the consequences are, because I represent people who cannot represent themselves.
Oh my gosh. This guy interrupted the president's speech, violating rules, accomplishing nothing in a childish stunt that the vast majority of the country didn't approve of. And here he is in this self-congratulatory manner, reacting to the fact that he got censured, which is basically just a statement that what you did was wrong, voted on and approved by Congress. Doesn't have it doesn't have very many serious ramifications. And he's saying that he's not ashamed, would do it again. Wow. I mean, maybe it's achieved his main goal, which I don't think was standing up for his constituents, because actively making your side more unpopular and sabotaging your ideas and your perception in the public's mind puts you further away from enacting the policies you think help your constituents. I think the real goal was to get himself attention and get himself on TV and talked about, and it certainly succeeded on that front. But to me, it's the audacity to compare this childish little stunt to MLK Jr. sitting in jail for the brave and courageous stand he took against literal segregation. You threw a fit during a president's speech and got escorted out. Those are not comparable things. You are not some hero because of what you did. And the audacity to make that suggestion is truly astounding. To even make that comparison. Now, after he got censured by the House, take a listen to Democrats singing in protest.
By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. The House had come to order. The House had come to order. What's it? Which?
You want to let him keep doing this, or tell me clear?
The House had come to order. Clear the well, please. Clear the well. The House has to continue its business.
Don't quit your day jobs, y'all. They're singing We Shall Overcome, which, guys, is a song, again, that is historically associated with the civil rights movement and the struggle against segregation. Babe, punishing a congressman because he breaks the rules and interrupts a speech the same way you would punish anybody else, a white Democrat, a Latinx Democrat, a they-them Democrat, anybody who pulled this little childish stunt would get the same treatment. That's not segregation. And y'all, again, are trivializing and exploiting this stuff. We talked about it yesterday. Like 80% of the country in flash polling, or at least of viewers of the speech, thought this stunt was childish and made Democrats look bad. And they are doubling down on it. At least some of the prominent figures on that side of the aisle are. Take a listen to Sunny Hostin of The View give her take on all this.
10 Democrats voted to censure Green.
Wow. Do you want a list of the 10?
Do you want to hear their name?
Yes, I do.
Why go after them, too? Go after the Republicans.
Because they don't know how to fight and be part of an opposition party. Representative Green gave them the example. The Democrats are not meeting the moment. It is very clear that Medicaid is on the table. It is very clear that Social Security is on the table. It is very clear that people will die. The baby boomers, the civil rights generation, they knew what they had to do. They were willing to fight and die for their rights. This generation of Congress, they are not meeting the moment. This is an existential crisis.
Hey, so this is insane. There is no existential crisis because Republicans are talking about increasing Medicaid spending, but not as much as is planned. That's what she means when they say cutting Medicaid, by the way. That's what they mean. That they're going to keep increasing the amount we're spending on these government healthcare programs, but by less than planned. So it will keep going up, but just not by as much. That's the existential threat they're saying justifies people to fight and die in resistance. The rhetoric is out of control, y'all. I mean, to be speaking like this in such dire terms when we literally have political assassination attempts and political assassinations like the Free Luigi cult and their little hero guy that they all love now. When we have that as a thing, as a disturbing trend in our politics, it is irresponsible to use this kind of wild rhetoric and to paint things in such alarmist and apocalyptic tones. I mean, look, I thought the country was in many ways in really rough shape during the Biden administration, and many people on the right did do this, speaking apocalyptic tones about it. It still wasn't that, and I didn't discuss it that way because it is not, it might get you more views and more attention, but it is irresponsible. It gins people up, it works up the viewers and gets them all alarmed and concerned in ways they don't actually need to be, and it can prompt people to take drastic action or to support more radicalism and extremism, and that is the last thing we need in this country. And I love how she's attacking the 10 Democrats that have any common sense. List the 10, please. I want to know who to thank. I want to know who still has some common sense about how you should conduct yourself and not being childish. And the funny thing is, she's saying they don't know how to fight and be a resistance. Actually, those are the 10 that do. Because with this little stunt and the other Democratic protests to the speech, they made Trump look more sympathetic. If Democrats had just simply all not shown up or had just sat, applauded at certain parts that were not objectionable and been adults during the parts they disagreed with and maybe shook their heads or just indicated some form of disapproval, then the whole conversation would have been about what Trump said, which did include some straight up factually false things and some wild statements. Instead, they put on a childish spectacle that got Trump somewhat off the hook because everyone was talking about that instead. And ironically, they played into Trump's hands. Those 10 who actually understand how to conduct yourself and how not to are the ones who do know how to resist in a dignified fashion and actually maybe foster some sort of unified pushback. But of course, the people on cable television who get paid millions of dollars, I'm sure, for this level of political analysis, think the wildly unpopular and unsuccessful approach is actually the right one, and that the few Democrats who understand that that's bad are the bad guys. If they go with this message and they double down on the cray-cray on their own side of the aisle, they better get used to losing. That's all I'll say. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And now it's time for some quick hits, some quick stories that came across my desk that I want to run through with you guys. Up first, this parent and child are both trans and are transitioning together. Take a listen to some coverage from the Daily Mail.
A mother and daughter from Brazil have revealed their double gender transition to become father and son. Rafael, 38, and Gustavo, 10. Both transitioned to male after being born with female biological characteristics. Gustavo began his transition at age 4, inspiring Rafael to follow suit. Rafael came out as male in 2023 and has since shared their journey with nearly 25,000 Instagram followers. The father and son have previously spoken out against people using the names they went by when they identified as women. Even though it is our right to have the social name respected in practice, respect rarely happens in fact, they said. Gustavo, a student and actor, has played both transgender and cisgender characters in films. He also receives care at the Transdisciplinary Outpatient Clinic for Gender Identity in Sao Paulo.
I can't decide which part of this story is craziest. The transing of a 4-year-old, that's when the transition began, which is simply demonic. I mean, a 4-year-old doesn't even know what gender or sex or any of these things really are. And so the idea that they can truly understand their sense of self and identity and know they're actually trapped in the wrong body is wild. They don't even know the difference between fantasy and reality, fact and fiction. I'm sure I could convince many 4-year-olds that I'm secretly from outer space. The idea that at that young age you would let your child make such serious decisions like this is insane to me and a massive red flag. But then the other crazy part of this is that the child transitioning inspired the grown adult parent to suddenly become trans and come out as trans. That is wild. A 4-year-old should not be shaping an adult's internal identity. Like, if you don't have yourself figured out by that age, and you are taking cues and leads from your 4-year-old, something is wrong here. This statistical improbability that this is all a genuine phenomenon and there's no agenda or ideas being pushed on anyone in this situation, I would put it near 0, okay? I find this whole story kind of horrifying. I think it's actually terrible that the parent here is putting the child into the public light like this and plastering their face all over social media and making them in the news. I'm sure that's not healthy for a child, especially one who's clearly, going through a lot to experience. But I'm sure it does get the parent a lot of attention and probably financial opportunities. So maybe that's the real motivation here. And I just continue to be so dismayed that somehow my rights and acceptance as a gay man have gotten wrapped up in and associated with all that. No, thank you. No, thanks. Nope. Absolutely not. Hard pass. Up next, this woke professor just dropped an insane take on live TV. Take a listen to this Columbia professor's analysis of Trump and Elon and Doge on MSNBC, where he suggested that their efforts to cut government are actually racist and sexist.
There are people who are charged with trying to find savings. So yes, it's an attack on government, but it's also an attack on this government. What I mean by that is it's an attack on this government that used to be headed by a black man. It's an attack on this government that almost elected a black woman to the highest office in the land. It's an attack on a government that has been more welcoming and more supportive of people who have come to this country in search for a better life.
What? Y'all, he just went back to Obama to say it's an attack on a government that used to be run by a black man. You mean all the way from back in 2008 to 2016? That's a long time ago. This is just such race-baiting nonsense because you could just say it's an attack on a government run by a white man, Joe Biden, until recently. Like, what's your point? It's just a very bizarre attempt to defend the federal government's clear abundance of waste and fraud and abuse and just bizarre misspending and just terrible financial situation by just reflexively using identity as a shield and a weapon, I guess. It's just something they're so accustomed to and so used to, but it simply doesn't work. And actually, there are a lot of legitimate concerns about Doge and the things they're doing, the way they're firing people. I mean, they're very much using a hammer, not a scalpel. And a lot of mix-ups and mistakes are happening. And there is a lot of ground there for them to actually make legitimate criticisms and raise real concerns. But high-profile voices, at least some of them, they can't resist the temptation towards this identitarianism, towards this victim script, towards constantly invoking all of this stuff ad nauseum. And I just don't know if they're ever going to get the hint, or if they're just going to keep pushing this line no matter how widely and resoundingly it is rejected by the American people. Up next, the UK just keeps showing us where woke insane ideology eventually takes you. The Times reports that minority and trans criminals could avoid jail under new rules. Ethnic minority and transgender criminals may be more likely to avoid prison under changes to sentencing guidelines that take effect next month. Updated guidance sent to judges says that they should consider whether an offender is from an ethnic, cultural, or religious minority when deciding whether to impose a custodial or community sentence. That means whether they stay in prison or get released back out to the public. Other factors include whether an offender has disclosed that they are transgender, according to the Sentencing Council, an independent body that provides guidance for judges and courts to ensure consistency and transparency across the country. The new guidance has sparked claims of a two-tier sentencing policy that treats ethnic minorities favorably. I wonder why it has sparked claims of that. Maybe because it literally is that, and it's insane. Now, high-level officials in the UK government, the Times reports, are already pushing back on this and trying to get it changed and saying they won't allow this to go into effect because this sentencing commission is an independent body, but so they didn't directly approve of this, the high-level officials, but they're going to try to stop this. And that's good, and I'm glad this won't go into effect, but like, how broken and how unhinged do your politics and your government have to be that anyone, even for a second, considered literally reinstituting, or I guess I don't know the history of the UK, how much they had this kind of thing, but instituting systemically racist rules, punishing people differently based on their skin color or their gender identity, so systemically biased in other ways. Like, what? One of the most core principles of justice is like equal punishment and justice for all, and we don't always live up to that, to be clear. The systems are very flawed in many ways, but that's what they're supposed to be striving towards. These people were like, nah, literally just let some people off the hook easier if they are somehow members of these marginalized communities. What about that is progressive? Like, what about that is liberal in any sense of what those words are supposed to mean? So if you ask me, it's not enough to just make sure these policies don't take effect. They need to find a way to remove whoever thought they were a good idea and approve them in the first place. And more broadly, we got to keep looking to the UK as a reminder of where our society will end up if we follow some of these poisonous ideologies to their logical conclusion. What do you guys think? Which of these quick hits was the craziest in your book? Let me know in the comments. And with that, that'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button before you go, and we'll talk again real soon.